Hi guys, thank you for coming and listening. My name is Julie. My name is Julie Sweeney Roth, and as Cindy had said, and she's probably told you before, all of us that work at Tribute and do the tours have some type of direct connection to September 11th and the events that happened that day. Whether we're a survivor, rescue recovery worker, resident of Lower Manhattan, there's many connections, but it's what we think makes what we do very special. I'm not going to sit up here and spew facts and figures to you because I think that's now starting to come out in history books. I also think that many of you may remember that day. I spoke with a high school in Massachusetts. I'm from Massachusetts now, and I spoke with a high school last year, and I think the most reality slap I've ever had in the face. They were younger. They were freshmen through seniors. There were very few kids that had any recollection of that day. And for those of us that live it every day, it still feels like yesterday. And when I had 5 kids in this high school raise their hand to say they remembered, and the other 150 to say, no, we've heard stories, our parents told us about it, it made me realize very quickly how fast time goes by. And my biggest fear in experiencing this event has always been that people will forget. So it's why I do what I do. It's why I tell my story. It's very selfish for me because I like to tell the story of what I did and where I was that day, because I did lose someone on that day, and it helps me remember him very clearly. And that's the best thing that I can do is continually talk about him. On the morning of September 11th, I lived in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. I was a high school teacher. I taught high school health and PE and biology. At the time, I was teaching high school health to a group of freshmen. And I had just moved to Cape Cod in June of 2001, so 2 months prior to the events of September 11th. And I moved there with my husband and our 2 dogs. And we were living our dream. It was a perfect time for us. The teaching job was great. I coached cross country. Everything was working out very well. My husband had taken a job that allowed him to work from our house. And so he, 3 weeks out of the month, was able to work from our house, which oftentimes consisted of him driving his Jeep to the beach and busting out his laptop. It was great. The 4th week of every month, he did have to travel. That was the downside. He loved to travel, though, and I actually liked when he traveled because I liked having some time to myself because he was always there because he worked out of the house. So that morning, it was my 5th day of teaching at this high school. I was a brand new teacher at this school. And it was my job to drop him off at the airport in Hyannis, which is a local airport that takes a shuttle to Boston. And I dropped him off, and he kissed me goodbye, and he said, "I'll see you Thursday." And I looked at him and I said, "Thursday?" And he said, "Yeah." He goes, "I shortened my trip, remember?" And on Sunday of that week, September 9th, he changed his flight from the 10th to the 11th and decided to come home Thursday instead of Friday. I said, "Oh, well, this will be a quick trip for you." And he said, "Yep." He said, "Love you." Got on the plane, and I went about my day. I was teaching the second period of the day, like I said, freshman health. And I don't know how you guys are here, but when I was defining health for these kids, I was asking them what they thought health was. And working out, eating right, all those things. But I also said, listen, there's a couple other things that we're not going to talk about. It's emotional health, it's mental health, it's spiritual health. And I said, and spiritual health is the one we're not going to talk about because as we know, in a public school system, we don't talk about things like that. So I just said to them, you know what? Believe in something. I go, just believe in something. I go, even if it's nothing, just be certain of your belief. I go, and that's yours to hold to yourself. Just believe in it. And I left it at that. 15 seconds worth of spiritual health talk. Knock on my classroom door, and it was the principal. And we all know how we feel when the principals come before you. Well, I thought he was coming for me. And to be honest with you, I was new, and I thought there was video cameras in the classroom, and I thought I was in trouble for uttering the word spiritual in a public school system. Lo and behold, that wasn't it. So then he says the other words. He said, "You have a telephone call." And I said, "A telephone call?" And then I was embarrassed. Teachers don't get personal phone calls, especially the principal coming to get you and getting pulled out of a classroom. So then I got afraid. I thought, why is this happening to me? Whatever. So I followed him down the hall, and I watched him. He was very nervous. And it was probably around 9:20 in the morning. And he brings me to his office, the phone call in the principal's office. So I get on the phone, and it's my mother-in-law, my husband's mother. And what's the matter? And she said, Julie, we have a situation. And I said, what? And she said, you need to come home. And I said, why? And she goes, Brian's on an airplane that's been hijacked. And I said, I think I would still say it to this day, I go, what does that even mean? I go, how do you know that? And he said, he called me. And I said, he called you? I said, well, that's good. He's calling people. He's talking. She goes, you need to know something. She said, he called me too. Yeah, you too, meaning Nick. And I said, no, he didn't. I go, you called me. She goes, no, he called you. I said, no, he didn't. Yes, he did. She said, listen to me, Julie. She's like, he called you. He must have called you at home. But then he called me. I said, well, what is he saying? She said, he said it's not good. He said he might have to hang up the phone. He told me he loved me. He told me he called me, and then he had to go. She said, you need to come home. And I said, okay, I'll be there when my day's done. She goes, no, you need to come home now. And I said, okay. She's like, and please hang up the phone, just come straight here. She said, don't turn on the television. Well, that's all I needed to hear. So I hang up the phone, and I look at the principal, and I'm like, can you turn on the television? And he said, no. And I said, yes. And he said, no. And I looked at him, and your seniors, you've all heard this language before. I said, God damn it, can we turn on the TV? And he said, okay. And he turned on the TV. And if you remember that day, and you remember the one thing they just kept showing over and over and over, because that's what everybody got on their cell phones and their video cameras, I turned on the TV, and this is what I said. A jumbo jet airliner over and over and over again plowing into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. Now at that time, I knew one thing. My husband was on a hijacked airplane. I knew that more than the news knew that. I knew someone on that plane. But the news didn't know what was happening. So they're talking about other planes and other places and buildings and this and that. So me knowing my husband, who at the time of his death was 38 years old, but up and through those 38 years, he was a pilot, not of this plane. He was a pilot in the Navy. He was an F-14 instructor out of Miramar, California. He, at Top Gun, the elite fighter weapons school in Miramar. He knew how to get out of any situation there was today. He fought in the Gulf War, in the Persian Gulf War. He watched people die. He knew how to do all these things. So I'm watching and I'm thinking, I feel bad for those people on that plane. There's nobody survived that crash, but my husband has to be on another plane. And to be honest with you, I envisioned Brian getting out of the plane somehow. That's just who he was. It wasn't a false thing to think about. It wasn't out of this world. My husband could have strapped on a parachute and jumped from this plane. He could have. So I'm thinking these things. But I also know that something is not good. So I decided I needed to come home like my mother-in-law told me. And I came home. And I'm remembering as I'm going home that she said he called me. So I walked into my house. And again, it's like a surreal dream world. And I walk into my house. Do you know how to play? I walk into my house and I see the message light blinking, 1. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's got to be from Brian. And I press play. And I will tell you what this says after if you're here.
Message 1. Jules, this is Brian. On an airplane that's been hijacked. The things will go well. I'm looking good. I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. So happy to time. Thanks to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you. And I want to be like the best friend. I do. Bye bye.
So, I get this message. And it's at 8:58 a.m. And it says, hey Jules, it's Brian. I'm on an airplane that's been hijacked. If things don't go well and it's not looking good, I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good and go have good times. And I say to my parents and everybody, I just totally love you and I'll see you when you get here. Bye babe, I hope I call you. I love the phone. That happened at 8:58 a.m. He then picked up the phone and called his mother. And you don't just pick up a phone on an airplane. Oh, you swipe a credit card, you have to go through this process. He spoke with his mother for over a minute. He spoke with her until just after 9 o'clock. Brian's plane crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center at 9:03 a.m. So he was on the phone with that peace of mind, a trained pilot, knowing that this plane was not going to land. And he knew this not because he knew things were flying into buildings. He knew this because he knew piloting, he knew flight patterns, and he knew whoever was behind the wheel of that plane was not landing that plane properly, because that plane flew so erratically, and that plane flew so fast, and that plane dropped 1,200 feet in a second at times. It was up and down. It was going faster than any jumbo jet airliner should ever fly. And they were doing this on purpose because their intent was to fly into this building and blow it up. Although he did not know that, my husband, I know in the soul of my souls and the gut of my guts that he was calling me to say goodbye. So in that instant, that vision that I saw on TV, although I wasn't sure at that point that that was the exact plane he was in, I knew he was gone. And then you take on this whole aura about yourself that you just never can imagine. You walk through your house, and I look at things that would have actually normally made me very angry. The dirty coffee cup in the sink, the shoes by the front door, he didn't flush the toilet, stupid things like that that you look at and you just embrace them, because these were the last things that this person ever did in their life, thinking that they were going to walk back into this house and be able to flush the toilet before their wife got mad at them, On September 12th, I woke up, and I almost feel like I took on Brian's attitude. He was very matter of fact. He was very black and white. He was very, this is what's happening to me, Julie, so you need to go do this, and you just need to be happy, and I'm going to see you again someday. And from the get-go, I always took on the attitude of, and this is my only advice I'm ever going to give to any of you, because, life's reality is we are all going to lose someone that we love. You may have already. You may be expecting it soon, and it might come as a shock to you sometime in the future, but it happens. And at 29 years old, it didn't happen to me yet. I was very lucky. I had lost nobody in my life that I was very close to. But from the get-go, I thought to myself, okay, I know what his beliefs were in death, which was very comforting. We talked about it months before he died. I knew what his final thoughts were before he died. He called me and told me. Would I much rather deal with all this pain that I'm going to deal with for years and years and years and years after, if the only other option was to never have known him at all? And the only thing that I can say to you is, when you lose someone in your life that you love, and you deal with this pain and you think it's not fair, and everybody's why me, why him, why her, would the other option of not ever having and loving and caring for that person in your life be better? And I don't think it is. If you really truly care for someone and this person changed you and you loved them and they loved you and you felt that love, I would have given that for 15 minutes and then dealt with pain, but I was very blessed and lucky to have had him for 3 years. And I know he loved me when he died, and I am just thankful for that every day. Who I feel bad for is the people that never knew him. That's who I feel bad for, because he would have changed your life like he changed mine. And I'm sad for you. You don't need to be sad for me. I loved him. I spent 3 years with him. I watched him build a house. I watched him build a car. We had dogs together. No kids. We had dogs. And he died loving me. And that's the best thing ever to experience and to feel. Brian never came home. I got nothing of Brian. I'm not sure if you know the facts, and I'm just going to talk for another 2 minutes here, but there are still over 1,000 people that have never been identified from 9/11. There was close to 3,000 deaths on that site, and over 1,000 people never came home. I never got a piece of Brian. I had a call in 2002 saying that they did ID him. I will never forget the phone call. It was realistic. They had ID people from the planes, believe it or not. But I argued and argued and argued, and finally we realized my husband's name was Brian David Sweeney. There was a firefighter, Brian Edward Sweeney, and they ID'd him, and they called the wrong person. But I still live in fear of that day because I don't want it. I don't need it. For me, he went to where he believed he was going in that instant, and I don't want any of the physical from this earth. I just don't. But they are still every day trying to ID the rest of the body parts for the families that do need it, and I'm glad that they're doing that for people that do need it. But the weirdest phenomenon, and I hope you never experience it, is to have that physical person in your life and then have them disappear. Disappear. Not one bone fragment. It just doesn't happen. It never happens. And no one could imagine it. And still, almost 12 years later, it's an undertaking to ID all these physical beings that lost their lives on that day. I've moved forward. I did that for me because I'm still here. Brian wanted me to, he told me to. That made it, I'll say easier, but I don't know what it would have been the other way, but he told me, go live your life, be happy, go do this, go do that. So I did. Not quickly, not right away, and not without always talking about Brian and thinking about him. But I remarried. I have 2 small boys. They know of Brian. His picture is all through my house. My current husband would have had to accept that, or that never would have happened for me. And it's a daily thing still. My 7-year-old, and I'll end on this note because it's heart-wrenching, but it's the sweetest thing that anybody could ever say. I've told him about Brian throughout his whole life. It sparks conversations of death and dying and heaven and God and whatever else I need to teach my child, like I want to teach him. And he said to me about 3 months ago, he said, Mommy, you were married before Daddy, right? And that's a hard concept for a little kid. And we had talked about it. And I said, yeah. I said, you know that. We talked about that. And he said, to Brian, right? And I said, yeah, to Brian. And he said, and he's in heaven? And I said, yeah, I believe he's in heaven. And he goes, it's really sad. And I said, I know it's sad. I go, why do you think it's sad? And he said, because Brian was supposed to be my daddy and he never had a chance to meet me. And I just thought, like, I got a science brain, so I'm like, oh no kid, that's not how it works. But I didn't say that. I'm like, I go, you know what? I go, that is really sad. I'm like, because he would have been a great dad. I go, but I believe, Tyler, that you have the daddy you're supposed to have. And, you know, he's a great dad, so it helps to be able to say this to him. And I'm like, and you love your daddy, right? And I go, you'd miss daddy if he wasn't your daddy. He's like, I would. I go, well, then we can think about Brian and we can be sad for him. He's like, okay, love you, that was me. So I'm going to pass this on to Tom.